It was raining the night Adrian Cole decided his life was no longer his own. The city lights blurred behind the tinted windows of his black Bentley, and every drop on the glass seemed to echo the pounding in his chest. Somewhere across the ocean, in a marble hall filled with politicians and tycoons, his father was finalizing the arrangements for a marriage Adrian didn't want, to a woman he barely knew. The Cole family legacy demanded heirs, alliances, and power, not love. And Adrian was suffocating in it. He wasn't the type to bend under pressure, but the weight of expectation had been pressing on him for months, crushing every thought of freedom. Tonight, though, something inside him had cracked. If the only way to escape the trap was to marry someone, anyone, of his own choosing, then so be it. He would make it fast, reckless, and irreversible. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of unexpected love to change lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to Stories Collection, so you never miss another inspiring story. Your support helps us bring more moments like this to life. Adrian told the driver to keep going until the city grew darker and the polished storefronts turned into broken windows and shuttered doors. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew this wasn't just about rebellion, it was about finding someone untouched by the cold games of the wealthy. Someone who didn't care about his bank accounts or his last name. That's when he saw her. She was sitting on the wet curb beneath the flickering sign of a closed diner, her knees pulled up to her chest, a threadbare coat wrapped tightly around her small frame. Her face was pale, lips trembling from the cold, but there was something in her eyes, something fierce beneath the exhaustion. Adrian stepped out into the rain, his polished shoes sinking into the puddles. She didn't move when he approached, only lifted her chin in quiet defiance. Her name, she finally told him, was Claire. She had been living on the streets for months, after losing her job and then her apartment. Her parents were gone, friends had turned away, and yet, she hadn't given up. He didn't explain much, just that he needed to marry someone tonight. She looked at him like he might be crazy. Maybe he was. But in the end, desperation met desperation, and they stood together in a small, half-lit chapel 2 hours later, a bewildered minister officiating over a marriage neither of them fully understood. At first, it was nothing but a legal transaction for Adrian, a shield against his family's plans. He moved Claire into one of his penthouse apartments, left her with warm clothes and a bank card, and retreated into the whirlwind of his business life. But Claire, she didn't fit the part of the silent, grateful wife. She was curious. She asked questions. She explored the city like someone tasting sunlight after years in the dark. And little by little, Adrian began to see her not as the girl he'd married on impulse, but as a living, breathing person with dreams, scars, and a quiet resilience that humbled him. It wasn't easy. The tabloids pounced as soon as photos of Claire surfaced. Mystery wife of young tycoon, a gold digger's dream. The headlines cut deep, and Claire retreated into herself, feeling unworthy and out of place. Adrian, for the first time in his life, found himself defending someone not for appearances, but because he cared. He confronted his father, who accused him of dragging the family name into the gutter. He refused to annul the marriage, even when offered millions to walk away. Claire overheard the argument one evening, and something inside her shifted. No one had stood up for her in years. Slowly, she began to open up about her past, the childhood home she lost when her parents died in a car accident. The job she loved, working in a small community library, until it shut down. The nights she slept in bus stations because she couldn't bear the danger of alleys. Adrian listened, not like a man distracted by his phone or schedule, but like someone memorizing every word. She wasn't the trophy wife his world expected. She was something far rarer, honest, kind, and entirely uncalculated. Months passed. Their marriage, once a legal loophole, became a fragile bridge between two very different worlds. They fought sometimes, about the way she avoided public events, about his endless work hours. But they also shared quiet dinners on the rooftop, laughter over burnt toast when Adrian tried to cook, and long walks where she introduced him to her favorite hidden corners of the city. He began to realize he wasn't just protecting her from his world. She was saving him from it. The breaking point came when Adrian's father orchestrated a cruel setup, inviting Claire to a high society gala, then publicly humiliating her by revealing her homeless past in front of the press. The room had gone silent, cameras flashing like gunfire. Adrian stepped to her side, took her hand, and told everyone in that glittering, poisoned room that this was his wife, the woman he chose, and the one he would stand by until his last breath. Claire didn't cry. She just squeezed his hand, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. From that night on, they stopped pretending their marriage was just an escape plan. They started building a life, not the polished, magazine-perfect version, but something real. They worked together to open a shelter in the old diner where Adrian had first seen her, offering meals, job training, and warmth to those living on the streets. Claire ran it with the same quiet strength that had carried her through her own darkest nights. And Adrian found himself there more often than in the boardroom, sleeves rolled up, serving coffee and listening to stories. If this story has touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support means we can keep bringing you powerful, human stories that remind us all what love, courage, and second chances can do. And now, before we end, here's a special request. Comment below with the most selfless act of kindness you've ever witnessed, or experienced, so together we can fill this space with hope. Alright, let's take the story deeper and stretch it toward the 6,000 word range so it reads like a full cinematic YouTube script. I'll keep the long, flowing paragraphs, add more emotional beats, and build vivid scenes so the pacing works perfectly for narration. It was raining the night Adrian Cole decided his life was no longer his own. The streets gleamed black under the downpour, and the sky above the city churned in restless gray. His Bentley slid through the storm, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up. Somewhere in the back of his mind, the image of his father's face lingered, stern, polished, immovable, announcing over a glass of brandy that the engagement papers were already signed. To another wealthy family. To a woman Adrian barely remembered meeting. The Cole family empire had been built on deals like this, cold mergers disguised as marriages, and his father expected him to play the part of dutiful son. But the thought of it made his chest tighten until he couldn't breathe. He had wealth, status, and the kind of life that made strangers envious, yet here he was, trapped like a pawn on his own chessboard. His friends didn't understand, his employees didn't dare ask questions. And his father, he didn't care whether Adrian loved the woman or not, he just wanted the contract fulfilled. That night, something inside Adrian finally snapped. If marriage was the only way to keep his father from pushing him into a corner, then he would choose his own wife. Right now. Tonight. Even if it meant marrying a stranger. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of unexpected love to change lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to Stories Collection, so you never miss another inspiring story. Your support helps us bring more moments like this to life. The city lights began to fade as the Bentley rolled into a district Adrian rarely visited, a place where the sidewalks were cracked, and neon signs blinked weakly over half-empty streets. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror, waiting for instructions. Adrian's voice was calm but absolute. "Keep driving," he said. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but his instincts were pulling him farther from the glass towers and manicured avenues of his world. And then he saw her. She was sitting on the cold curb beneath the flickering sign of a boarded-up diner, her knees pulled to her chest, an old wool coat wrapped around her like fragile armor. Strands of wet hair clung to her cheeks. A battered backpack lay beside her, and she was holding a paper cup with both hands, as if willing whatever heat was left to stay inside. Adrian stepped out into the rain without thinking, his Italian leather shoes soaking through instantly. She didn't startle when he approached, only lifted her face slowly, revealing eyes that were far too tired for her age. Her name was Claire. She told him this reluctantly, like the name was something she had to protect. She had been homeless for almost 6 months after losing the job that had been her last tether to stability. Before that, she'd lost her parents in a car accident, then her apartment when the bills stacked too high. She didn't beg. She didn't complain. She spoke in short, careful sentences, as though measuring how much trust he deserved. That was when the words came out of Adrian's mouth before he could second-guess them. "I need to marry someone tonight." It was absurd, reckless, and half-mad, and yet, by midnight, they were standing in a small chapel lit by the dim glow of stained glass. The minister looked like he hadn't slept in years, flipping through his prayer book as though he'd seen everything and was still confused by this. Claire wore a borrowed coat over her rain-soaked clothes. Adrian's tailored suit looked almost out of place beside her. They signed the papers, said the vows, and walked out as husband and wife, strangers bound by a decision neither could fully explain. At first, it was all business. Adrian moved her into a spacious penthouse, gave her a bank card, and disappeared back into his schedule. But Claire, she didn't behave like the socialites he was used to. She didn't rush to buy designer clothes or decorate her life for Instagram. She walked the streets during the day, finding little cafes and bookstores, breathing in the freedom she hadn't known in years. And in the evenings, she would return with a quiet presence that made the enormous apartment feel less like a showroom and more like a home. Adrian began noticing things. How she brewed tea late at night and left an extra cup on the counter for him without saying a word. How she read worn paperbacks instead of scrolling her phone. How her laugh, rare but unguarded, seemed to loosen something inside his chest. And slowly, the woman who had been a quick solution to a family problem started becoming someone he wanted to understand. But the world he came from didn't make that easy. The tabloids caught wind of his mystery wife. Splashing headlines across their covers, "Gold digger marries young tycoon." Claire stopped going out for days at a time, afraid of being recognized, humiliated. Adrian found himself canceling meetings to stay home with her, cooking pasta badly just to see her smile. The real storm hit months later. His father invited them to a gala, under the guise of introducing her properly. Claire dressed in a simple navy gown Adrian had chosen himself, looking both nervous and beautiful. But halfway through the night, his father took the microphone, called attention to her, and revealed, in front of every guest and reporter, that his son's wife had been homeless. The laughter was subtle but sharp, the kind that cuts through skin. Cameras flashed. Claire's hands trembled as she set down her glass. Adrian didn't hesitate. He took her hand, stepped forward, and in a voice that carried across the marble hall, told the crowd she was his wife, the woman he chose, the one he loved, and if anyone had a problem with that, they could leave. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of a few doors quietly closing. That night changed everything. From then on, they stopped pretending. Claire opened up about her dreams, about wanting to help others who had been where she was. Together, they bought the old diner where he'd first seen her, renovating it into a shelter and job training center. Claire ran it with the same stubborn kindness that had kept her alive on the streets. Adrian, once consumed by corporate deals, found himself rolling up his sleeves to serve food, greet guests, and learn the names of people no one else noticed. They didn't have a perfect marriage. They argued, made mistakes, got tired. But they also learned to fight for each other instead of against the world separately. And in the quiet moments, the shared glances across the shelter kitchen, the late-night walks under city lights, they realized they had stumbled into something neither had been looking for, but both had needed desperately. If this story has touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support means we can keep bringing you powerful, human stories that remind us what love, courage, and second chances can do. And before we end, here's a special request. Comment below with the most selfless act of kindness you've ever witnessed or experienced, so together we can fill this space with hope.